Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Major General Michael C. McCurry, Commanding General, United States Army Aviation Center of Excellence, and the installation, welcome to the post-redesignation ceremony honoring Chief Warrant Officer 4 retired Michael J. Novosel Sr. Please rise for the invocation given by the U.S. Army Garrison Chaplain, Lieutenant Colonel Peter T. Hoffman, and remain standing for the arrival of the colors and the singing of the national anthem by Sergeant First Class Jonathan Bray from 1st and 13th Aviation Regiment.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, I humbly invoke your blessing upon this ceremony and the redesignation of our post from Fort Rucker to Fort Novosel. We lift our hearts in sincere thanksgiving for the bountiful evidence of your rich blessing upon our nation. We thank you for the opportunity to serve our country, whether as aviators, as part of the civilian workforce that supports our military, or as family or community members or political leaders, as represented here today. Lord, in times past, you have renamed certain individuals, such as Jacob to Israel or Abram to Abraham, to give them a new identity and better reflect your purpose and mission for them. So today we rename our post in honor of an aviator and hero of our local community to better reflect our purpose and mission as the Home of Army Aviation. Now, Lord, as we redesignate, may you also strengthen us to rededicate our energies individually and collectively to live out our nation's creed, one nation under God, with liberty and justice for all. And may your blessings rest and abide upon us all as we continue our mission to train aviators. Above the best, in Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
So proudly we held at the twilight's stripes and stars through the perilous fight. O'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated. Joining us today from the USACE Command Team are Major General and Mrs. Michael C. McCurry, Commanding General, United States Army Aviation Center of Excellence. Mr. and Mrs. Robert C. Dewar, Deputy to the Commanding General. Brigadier General Matthew Strub, Deputy Commanding General, Army National Guard for Aviation. Chief Warrant Officer 5 and Mrs. Michael L. Lewis, Chief Warrant Officer of the Aviation Branch. And Command Sergeant Major and Mrs. James D. Wilson, Command Sergeant Major of the Aviation Branch. Distinguished guests in attendance today are General Gary Brito, Commanding General, United States Army Training and Doctrine Command. The Honorable Mark Blankenship, Mayor of Ozark. The Honorable William Cooper, Mayor of Enterprise. The Honorable David Hayes, Mayor of Geneva. The Honorable Jamie Staten, Mayor of Daleville. The Honorable Mark Saliba, Mayor of Dothan. The Honorable Bobby Borland, Mayor of Pinkard. Senator Josh Carnley, Alabama Senator of District 31. Lieutenant General Retired and Mrs. Danielle Pedrosky. Mr. Michael Schmitz, Civilian Aide to the Secretary of the Army. Mr. John Ferguson, Regional Director for Senator Tommy Tuberfield. Mrs. Melanie Hill, District Staffer for Senator Katie Britt and her husband, Mr. Walter Hill. Ms. Dana McCain, State Director for Senator Katie Britt. Major General Michael Talley, Commanding General, United States Army Medical Center of Excellence. Command Sergeant Major Victor Laragione, Command Sergeant Major, United States Army Medical Center of Excellence. Major General Retired Dick Kenyon. Brigadier General Gene Meredith, Commanding General, Combat Readiness Center. Command Sergeant Major James L. Light, Command Sergeant Major, Combat Readiness Center. Brigadier General Retired and Mrs. Edward Sinclair. Brigadier General Retired and Mrs. Timothy Edens. Distinguished family of Chief Warrant Officer 4 Novosel include daughter and son-in-law, Mr. and Mrs. Ronald Clevenger. Daughter, Miss Janine Vineyard. Son and daughter-in-law, Mr. and Mrs. John Novosel. Grandchildren, Mr. Cody Vineyard and his wife, Mrs. Jessica Vineyard. Mr. Michael Vineyard and his wife, Mrs. Katie Vineyard. And great-grandchildren, Paisley Vineyard, Declan Vineyard, and Finley Vineyard. Ladies and gentlemen, our host for today's ceremony, the Commanding General, United States Army Aviation Center of Excellence, Major General Michael C. McCurry.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Home of Army Aviation on this cool and breezy Alabama morning. And thanks for being a part of this remarkable moment in the history of Army aviation and the Wiregrass. I would like to recognize just a few of our guests one more time. First and foremost, thank you to the entire Novosel family. CW4 Novosel's children, Jeannie, Patricia, and John, and their spouses, Cody and Lisa. Grandchildren, Jessica and Katie, great-grandchildren, Paisley, Declan, and Finley, for traveling here from locations all across the country. Your presence here makes this day even more special. Special thanks to the Garrison Command Team and the 41st Army Band from the Mississippi Army National Guard, lending some pomp and circumstance to this ceremony. As always, thank you to my good friends and battle buddies, the squad of mayors that support our soldiers and families, to State Senator Carnley and the senior regional and district staff members for Senators Tuberville and Britt's offices. Thank you for being here. Your support of our soldiers, civilians, families, and soldiers for life that live and work in the surrounding areas is unmatched by any community I've been a part of in my 36 years of service. I'd also like to thank General Gary Brito, Commanding General of Training and Doctrine Command, as the Army's senior representative for today's ceremony. Sir, thank you for being with us to mark this historic day. This post is truly a special place. It is the place where soldiers who dream of flying make their dreams come true. It is also where we make lifelong friends on and off the post, and where we create memories. That's why the guards at the gates always greet you with a warm southern welcome home. The history of this post and the memories made here since the 22nd of January 1942, when the Ozark Triangular Division Camp began, are indelible in our minds. A post that started with a contract to build 1,500 buildings in 120 days and was completed in 106, has repeatedly adapted and changed in both name and function. It officially became Camp Rucker in June of 1942 while housing the 81st Wildcat Division. It housed German and Italian POWs in World War II and the 47th Division during the Korean War era. It even briefly inactivated for a few months in 1954, before the Army moved the aviation school from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and it was renamed Fort Rucker on the 26th of October, 1955. This place holds a special significance to aviation soldiers and families that have trained here, served here, and lived here. That is not more true for any family than the McCurrys. As 3 consecutive generations have trained here, this installation always feels like home to us. As the son of an Army aviator, I attended Fort Rucker Primary in the mid-1970s, swam in the Officers Club pool, watched my fathers fly over on the parade field, and vividly remember eating soft ice cream at Shoney's and Enterprise. My wife, Sadie, whose father also trained here, will always be attached to Fort Rucker since it's printed on her birth certificate from Lister Army Hospital. Although, out of an acute sense of self-preservation, I will decline to mention the year. I attended flight school here myself, trained by instructor pilots who, like CW4 Michael Novosel, had flown over the jungles of Vietnam. Both my daughter and son-in-law went to flight school here, and I was able to be the guest speaker at graduation. So it is not lost on me that I will be the last senior commander of Fort Rucker. However, this post is more than a name. It's a community where Americans from all over the country come to become aviation soldiers, warrant officers, and aviators, and all are accepted by the welcoming people of the Wiregrass. The bonds between the Army and the surrounding community are strong, and the relationship we have strengthens each and every day. It's a partnership of love between the people of the Wiregrass and those on this post. A common love for country, the love you show our soldiers and families, and the love that grows in our hearts for you. Today, we recommit ourselves to defending our nation together and continuing to strengthen that bond. Here on post, we'll continue to fly and train with approximately 5 brigades of aircraft, flying 1/3 of the flight hours in the entire Army. On the base and surrounding area, we will continue to operate 90 airfields and training sites, all possible because of the local residents of the Wiregrass. Over 25,000 of us live, work, and recreate side by side on this post every day. And together, we bring just over $1.5 billion annually to the community. This week, we will celebrate the 40th anniversary of Army Aviation as a separate branch of the combat arms. Officially designated so by Secretary of the Army John O. Marsh on 12 April 1983. We also celebrate the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. On January 27, 1973, the Paris Peace Accords were signed. Would all Vietnam veterans please stand so that we can recognize and thank you for your service. The theme of this year's anniversary is honoring the past and transforming for the future. Army aviation traces its roots to Thaddeus Lowe during the Civil War, where we first broke friction with the ground with balloons used for reconnaissance and artillery spotting. Balloons like the Intrepid, which is now the call sign of the Aviation Center headquarters. Just like the post Army Aviation evolved and transformed to support the soldier on the ground. In World Wars I, II, and Korea, commanders were able to see the battlefield from another dimension, strike targets with improved accuracy, move critical supplies, evacuate the wounded, and extend command and control. We saw this grow again in Vietnam, America's first helicopter war, where at Fort Rucker, you helped train more than 40,000 helicopter pilots from 1961 to 1975. And 2 of those pilots that flew here were named Novosel. After Vietnam, we adapted once again to ensure the Army was ready to fight and win on the next battlefield as we transitioned to air-land battle under Army aviation legends like Major General Carl McNair, the founding father of the branch, after whom we will name the headquarters later this week. And most importantly today, we will officially name this installation after an incredible man, a dedicated American, a committed soldier, and the preeminent Army aviator. In 1985, then Major General Ellis Parker, commanding general of the Aviation Center, named the main street on the post Novosel Street, the street you drove in on before you turned into the museum parking lot. And it was done during his retirement ceremony. Well, we moved quickly in Army aviation, and it only took us 38 years to decide a street wasn't enough. Fort Novosel is where future soldiers will come to turn their dreams of becoming aviators and leaders into reality. And it is fitting that we are redesignating the post after a true hero, an Army aviator, warrant officer, an impeccable character, and extraordinary competence. CW4 Novosel's life of service in uniform is something out of a Hollywood movie. His story began in the small town of Etna, Pennsylvania. He was a first-generation American born to Croatian-speaking European immigrants, and from an early age felt an immense sense of gratitude to America for the opportunities afforded to him and his family. Mr. Novosel enlisted in the Army Air Corps on February 7th, 1941, months before the attack on Pearl Harbor. It was the first of 3 wars in which he volunteered to serve and fight during his storied 44-year career in uniform. After enlisting in the Army Air Corps, he would commission as an officer, attend flight training, and eventually fly B-29 bombers over the Pacific in World War II. A few years after the war, Mr. Novosel left active duty, but continued to serve the nation as an aviator in the reserves of the newly formed Air Force. And when the Korean War broke out, he volunteered once again to serve, flying airplanes, moving personnel, equipment, and critical supplies to and around the Korean Peninsula. Following the truce, he continued his service in the Air Force Reserves, while flying as a commercial airline pilot. However, when the Vietnam conflict broke out in 1963, he again felt the call to serve. He decided to volunteer for active duty, but the Air Force told him they were overstrength senior pilots of his age. So he volunteered to join the Army as a warrant officer and aviator. He believed he would serve as an instructor at Camp Walters, Texas, or Fort Rucker, based on his age and flying experience. However, as Mr. Novosel put it, the Army didn't see it that way and sent him to work like anybody else, and he deployed twice to Vietnam. Originally assigned to a Special Forces flight detachment, he found a home in Dustoff, or medevac, rescuing the wounded from the battlefield. During his 2 tours in Vietnam, he conducted over 2,500 extraction missions, evacuating 5,589 wounded American and Vietnamese soldiers. One mission stands out. On October 2nd, 1969. After a 7-hour mission that morning, he received another call, notifying him that a group of South Vietnamese soldiers had been isolated and surrounded by the North Vietnamese Army. Through relentless machine gun fire, CW4 Novosel and his crew made 15 separate passes, hovering feet above the ground and pulling wounded soldiers onto the aircraft. On his final pass, CW4 Novosel was shot twice, once in the hand and the foot, nearly causing a crash. At the end of the mission, Mr. Novosel is credited with saving the lives of 29 men. And in recognition of this heroism and courage, was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions. After Vietnam, he served with the Golden Knights as an instructor pilot here, as a safety officer in Korea, and finally completed his career as an evaluator in our Directorate of Evaluation Standardization and as the Senior TAC Officer for the Warrant Officer Flight Program. Finally retiring in 1985 as the last World War II veteran on active flying status. By the end of his 4-decade military career, Mr. Novosel had impacted countless lives, voluntarily served in 3 wars, was awarded the Medal of Honor, 3 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 2 Bronze Stars, Purple Hearts, numerous air medals, including for valor, and was inducted into the Army Aviation Hall of Fame in 1975. Truly a story for the silver screen. But CW4 Novosel's character and who he was to his family and the community is what make him truly remarkable. Following his retirement, Mr. Novosel remained active in the Wiregrass, living right here in Enterprise. When asked about his service, the first thing he would say he was most proud of was flying medevac with his son, CW4 Michael Novosel Jr. in Vietnam, the only father and son team to fly together in combat. He was also extremely proud of the impact Jeannie, Patty, and John had made on their families and their local communities and country. I heard him briefly once as he mentored on the post in the 80s, and he had a timely and great sense of humor. And sir, if you'll indulge me, former Aviation Branch Chief Lieutenant General Dan Petrosky served 3 separate assignments with him. General Petrosky said of Mr. Novosel that he truly was dedicated to Army aviation throughout his entire life, as demonstrated by his consistent support for Fort Rucker up until his death. General Petrosky recalls Mr. Novosel once gave him a check ride at Hunter Army Airfield. Later, when Major General Petrosky was the CG here at Fort Rucker, he would always acknowledge Mr. Novosel during events as a true hero and ask him to stand to be recognized. Mr. Novosel would then stand. The crowd would always respond with a loud and long applause. General Petrosky would then say in a joking manner, "Okay, that's enough. Mike gave me a C on that check ride." Mr. Novosel never said a word. And then the last time at General Petrosky's retirement, he recognized CW4 Novosel in his remarks, and after retelling the check ride story, this time Mr. Novosel said, "And the C was a gift." Like you, the crowd erupted with laughter. So while the jury's still out on General Petrosky's performance on that flight eval, what is certain is that Mr. Novosel had a great sense of humor and was adored by those in uniform and this community. While we could be here all day recounting the people, units, and communities Mr. Novosel influenced on over his 83 years on this earth, I will leave you with this. The relationship between this post and the community will continue to grow. And from this day forward, CW4 Novosel's name will be the first thing our soldiers and aspiring aviators see when they drive onto this post. And his name will be the last thing they see when they're handed their graduation certificate and leave to serve our nation and uphold the sacred trust with the soldier on the ground. His legacy of service and patriotism is a spark to those in uniform striving to be all they can be. He will inspire those in the surrounding community to take up the challenge and serve as part of the Army. As the son of immigrants that rose to be a legend of Army aviation, his story is the American dream. It proves that we can achieve greatness with hard work and dedication if we seize the endless possibilities provided by serving in the Army. Mr. Novosel was a proud father, husband, Medal of Honor recipient, and the very definition of an American serving his nation. And from today forward, his name will be synonymous with Army aviation. Be all you can be, fly Army above the best.
Command Sergeant Major Wilson and Chief Warrant Officer 5 Lewis will now escort the Novosel family forward. Please direct your attention to the screen on the field, where you will witness the unveiling of the Fort Novosel Monument by 2 master aviators. Chief Warrant Officer 5, Michael A. Main, 1st Aviation Brigade Command Chief Warrant Officer, and Chief Warrant Officer 5, Robert E. Macy, 110th Aviation Brigade Command Chief Warrant Officer. These aviators represent the professionalism of our force and honor the legacy of Chief Warrant Officer 4, Michael Novosel. The switch being used to unveil the Fort Novosel monuments at all post entrances is a UH-1 cyclic stick, like the one used by Chief Warrant Officer 4 Michael Novosel and other Army aviators during Vietnam. Please join us as we count down from 5 for the unveiling. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Novosel.
Wow, so that just happened. Well, good morning, friends of Fort Novosel. I'm still in shock and awe at saying that out loud, even after just finishing this redesignation ceremony a few short moments ago. I know if my father were here today, he would be humbled and honored that his name was associated with the Home of Army Aviation and the surrounding community, which he cherished so much. My father was a patriot all his life, and his sense of dedication and obligation to the service of our country began early as a son of Croatian immigrants, born in 1922. That's over a century ago. A quick comment, his first language was Croatian. He had to learn English, I guess, playing with kids. Who knows? He didn't tell us. Anyway, he dedicated his professional life to aviation, and many of his most notable achievements and milestones were as military aviator. My father's career began 82 years ago in the Army Air Corps, flying multiple aircraft, ultimately ending the war flying the B-29. Later, his career transitioned into the enemy, into the newly formed Air Force. I said enemy, didn't I? I didn't mean that. Well, anyway, after retiring from the Air Force Reserves in 1955, he flew as a commercial airline pilot until he felt the call to service in the initial days of Vietnam. It was at that time he again found a home in the Army, in Army Aviation. This is, of course, after the Air Force declined him as too old to fly, and then he just returned to the Army as a warrant officer, flying medevac missions while serving 2 tours in Vietnam, extracting over 5,500 casualties. One such mission resulted in the main reason we're here having this ceremony today, in addition to his distinguished career and tremendous contributions to Army aviation. Most of you know the story why my father was awarded the Medal of Honor, but what's funny is that's not the whole story that our family often reminisced about when we spoke about his service. But first, if you would allow me, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge another Michael Novosel who could not be with us today, my brother Mike Novosel Jr. He passed away 12 years ago. He too was a warrant officer, Army aviator, who served in Vietnam in the same medevac unit as my father, and sometimes in the same aircraft as co-pilot. His contribution in that unit resulted in approximately 2,500 medevac extractions, with credit due to my father's exemplary leadership while serving as a master Army aviator. My father used to joke about when he extracted my brother during their tour together in Vietnam. For those of you that don't know, both my father and brother, Mike Jr., they evacuated each other after they were each shot down on 2 separate occasions, just days apart. My father told us how he flew out to rescue my brother. He hovered his aircraft right above where he was waiting, enabling my brother to just climb on board the aircraft directly. But as luck would have it, perhaps 2 weeks later, my father was shot down. And my brother was sent out to rescue him, to return the favor, so to speak. But when my brother arrived, he landed some distance away, and my father had to wade through a rice paddy in order to climb on board my brother's helicopter covered in mud. But still, it's always good to be rescued. It's always a good story. Anyway, after my father's second and final tour of Vietnam, he went on to serve with the Golden Knights at Fort Bragg, as an instructor pilot here at Fort Rucker, as a safety officer in Korea, and finally completing his career as an evaluator at DES, and once again teaching Army aviators back at the Home of Army Aviation. While the length and achievements of his service in Army aviation is remarkable in its own right, his impact to the United States Army the Aviation Center of Excellence, and the Wiregrass are equally noteworthy. After he took off the uniform of our nation, my father continued to serve long into his retirement. He stayed connected to this post and the local community by sharing his story with generations of aviators training here. This genuine connection was steadfast, evident by being invited several times each year to speak to soldiers, community members, and attend events as distinguished guest throughout the United States and even in Europe, until his health declined and it made it impossible in 2006. This is why it is fitting that his Medal of Honor, which he his Medal of Honor, which he proudly wore, should be permanently displayed here to continue his storied legacy and be put on display to inspire past, present, and future generations of Army aviators. So on behalf of my siblings and the entire Novosel family, we're proud to present our father's Medal of Honor to the post, now in his name, and to be preserved by the Army Aviation Museum, now and forever. Thank you.
At this time, the Novosel family will present Chief Warrant Officer 4 retired Michael Novosel's Medal of Honor to Major General McCurry. Receiving the Medal of Honor for safekeeping is Mr. Bob Mitchell, the Aviation Museum Director. Now that the post name has been changed from Fort Rucker to Fort Novosel, honoring Chief Warrant Officer 4 Michael Novosel, Colonel Robert J. Holcomb, the Garrison Commander, and Command Sergeant Major Christopher T. Doss, the Garrison Command Sergeant Major, will execute the casing of the Fort Rucker colors and the uncasing of the Fort Novosel colors. The practices and usage of military flags date back to the Revolutionary War and have evolved in the American military history ever since. The casing of the colors is a traditional ceremony held by the United States Army commemorating a unit's lineage, its honor, and its identity. The colors represent all soldiers, past, present, and future. And the colors stand as a silent reminder of the past glories as well as an inspiration for future endeavors. The Garrison Command Team will now uncase the Fort Novosel colors. This symbolizes the continued commitment to Army aviation with a renewed focus on training Army aviators and serving the surrounding communities. With this redesignation, we honor Chief Warrant Officer 4 Michael Novosel's bravery, sacrifice, and enduring contributions to Army aviation. Effective 10 April 2023, Fort Rucker is redesignated as Fort Novosel in accordance with General Order 2023-05. Signed, the Honorable Christine E. Warmoth, Secretary of the Army. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fort Novosel. Ladies and gentlemen, feel free to move out from underneath your tents and look skyward for a special tribute. Chief Warrant Officer 4 Michael Novosel served 2 tours in Vietnam as a medevac pilot flying 2,543 missions while airlifting over 5,500 medical evacuees in the UH-1. At the time of his retirement in 1985, he had accumulated 12,400 flight hours, 2,038 of which were flown in combat. This morning's UH-1 flyby aircraft is provided by the Friends of Army Aviation. Friends of Army Aviation is a nonprofit organization with a mission of educating the American public to the contributions of Army Aviation and to support families and friends of soldiers who have given the ultimate sacrifice in support of freedom around the world. The aircraft is being flown today by Lieutenant Colonel retired Chuck Schieffer and Vietnam veteran Chief Warrant Officer 4 retired David Shepard. The aircraft before you, Army 16467, is painted in medevac colors to honor those who served as dust-off crew members. This aircraft is dedicated to 2 Vietnam Dust-Off Medal of Honor recipients, Major General Patrick Brady, and our honored designee, Chief Warrant Officer 4, Michael Novosel. Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats and remain standing for the retiring of the colors, the singing of the Aviation Branch song, and the Army song. This concludes today's ceremony. There will be a reception immediately following the ceremony at the Aviation Museum. Please join us there as we celebrate this momentous occasion. Thank you all for attending the ceremony, and special thanks, most of all, to the Novosel family. Above the best.